Hello, and welcome to myfinancesteacher.org. In this video, we're going to talk about Bitcoin. And actually, over the last few days, on the back of some very interesting bullish news from PayPal regarding Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, on the back of this news, Bitcoin has actually done very well over the last few days. So based on this sort of news, when more and more companies are adopting cryptocurrencies, the general long-term perspective for Bitcoin and a handful of other cryptocurrencies is outstanding in my opinion. Although in the shorter term, over the next several days, the outlook is not as amazing. And I'm going to tell you why in this video. But before that, let me remind you to click that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let's move on. So generally, the Bitcoin cycles last for about a couple of months. Historically, this cycle lasted for around 64 days on average over the last few years. The ongoing cycle that started somewhere at the beginning of September is now 44 days old, which means that, well, yes, while there might be some potential for just another couple of days, few days of upward momentum in Bitcoin, sometime in another couple of weeks, we possibly should see some sort of a decline into the end of the ongoing Bitcoin cycle. Secondly, if you look at the 14-day RSI, it's already into overbought area. And again, if you look at previous cycle tops, the rally in Bitcoin might not actually be over until the 14-day RSI spends quite a lot of time in that overbought area. So since this RSI has been overbought for only 2-3 days, again, we might still see some upward momentum in Bitcoin over the next several days, but in general, caution is advised over the next couple of weeks. And thirdly, we see Bitcoin poking second time through the upper range of the Bollinger Bands. And these Bollinger Bands are quite wide right now. Poking through the upper range of wide Bollinger Bands is often another indication that the price is getting a little bit overheated at the moment. Now, zooming out a little bit, this is a weekly chart of Bitcoin. We see that Bitcoin is approaching one of its previous significant highs from the summer of previous year, and that's somewhere around $13,800. So again, that says that while there is still some potential for price to possibly reach to that level over the next several days, this relatively significant high might actually prove to be some sort of a resistance zone, especially given that this ongoing cycle in Bitcoin is already a little bit old. In addition, we see that Bitcoin is also poking through the upper range of the Bollinger Bands on the weekly chart, and the weekly 14-week RSI is kind of close to overbought area. Again, all of that points to some caution. For that reason, I want to place some of my limit orders, some take profit orders sometime today, possibly to catch one of the last spikes in Bitcoin. And if you want to see the details of those orders, you're going to check out this fictitious portfolio page at myfinancesteacher.org. That's for members only, so you might consider joining us by clicking this register button. We update the members at myfinancesteacher.org on a range of assets quite frequently, as you see. Next, let's jump into some other indicators on Bitcoin showing that some caution might be advised over the next several days. The blue line over here is the Optimism index on Bitcoin. And generally, it's a good idea to buy Bitcoin when optimism is pretty low, when the so-called blood is flowing on the streets, when nobody wants this asset. So whenever the optimism index is low, somewhere close to this green line, that's a good time to buy. And whenever optimism is very high, when everybody is excited about some asset, whether it's Bitcoin or any other kind of asset, that might be a time to be a little bit cautious. As you see right now, the Optimism Index has spiked to over 80. It's at nearly 85. And as you see, generally, whenever Optimism Index is close to this red line, that is close to the tops on Bitcoin price. Although one might argue that this indicator, Optimism Index, is a bit of a leading indicator. We see that at least over the last few Bitcoin cycles, the cycles didn't actually top at the same time when the optimism on Bitcoin topped. The cycles topped a little bit later. So again, just as I said, possibly another few days of upward momentum in Bitcoin. But as optimism is extremely high right now, some caution is already advised. Next, let's have a look at the Fear and Greed Index, something similar to CNN's Stock Market Fear and Greed Index. This is applicable to cryptocurrencies. Right now, this index is at 73. And as you see, historically, whenever this index is somewhere above 70, that generally is a good idea to reduce your positions. Whenever this index is somewhere close to 20, that's generally a good idea to buy. So again, this index is at 73, it's barely above 70, meaning that, well, maybe another few days of upward momentum is quite possible. But you don't want to be greedy when the general markets are greedy. Instead, you want to be cautious. And lastly, let's have a look at market depth ratio, which is a ratio of buy orders to sell orders at a range of cryptocurrency exchanges on Bitcoin. The market depth ratio is at the bottom part of this chart, and of course the Bitcoin price is at the top. Whenever the market depth ratio is red, that means there are more sell orders rather than buy orders, as expressed in relative percentages. And whenever this market depth ratio is green, that means there are more buy orders on the market rather than sell orders, meaning that there is more buy pressure and price is likely to rise after this point. And on the contrary, of course, whenever the red spike appears, whenever the selling pressure is much higher than the buying pressure, whenever there are many more sell orders rather than buy orders, price is likely to drop. And as you see from these blue lines connecting some of these red spikes, those generally coincide with the price spikes. And after those, we see Bitcoin price cool down at least a little bit. This is commonly the case, although it's not always the case. For example, this last blue line doesn't really match with any sort of a spike in Bitcoin price. Instead, Bitcoin price did really well after that. But again, in most cases, market depth ratio in the red, when the selling pressure is higher than the buying pressure, indicates that some sort of a top is taking place, and again, caution would be advised. So that is my opinion on being cautious right now, although I am still holding a nice allocation to Bitcoins, and we are going to place some limit orders sometime today with the members at myfinancesteacher.org. Now I would like to hear from you if you think Bitcoin is going to break through this previous high at 1380 on the first attempt, or are we going to cool down, possibly down towards $11,000 over the next couple of weeks? Let me know in the comments below. While you're there, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, consider joining us at myfinancesteacher.org, and of course, good luck in your trades.